Hello and a warm welcome to the TNC Podcast, your go-to Norwich City listen, alongside the Pinken Podcast and the Scrimmage. That list is getting longer, isn't it? What other podcasts do we have?
I love how you change it every guest that comes on.
Got to keep Connor happy. We are joined by Connor Southwell.
Hello.
Good to see you, Connor.
Hello.
Remarkably, the last time we had you on probably a year ago, still being told it's not Southwell, it's Southwell.
It is.
So I've got that right. Connor, welcome.
Do you get annoyed every time he says it on our pod? Because we seem
Not
to quote
really.
you every week and he goes Southwell, and I go, no, it's not.
The first time I realised that was a thing, I had a PE teacher in about year 8 who said it for the first time, and I was like, what is that? And then I realised there was a racing connection, but that was the first time I'd ever heard it. But no, it doesn't bother me.
The reason I do it is if Connor's watching, he'll pick me up, and he's never picked me up on it, so he's obviously never watched it. Lots has happened, Connor. We talked to you mid-November, second international break of the season, I think. Is it the second one?
Yes.
Feels it's been about 7.
Third, yeah.
But Norwich are below mid-table in the Championship. So much has happened. I mean, how do you review things at this stage of the season? Are we where you expected us to be?
No, I think not quite. I probably expected Norwich to be between anywhere about 7th and 12th, if I'm honest. So that was kind of my expectation for this season, I think, as a whole. And they obviously find themselves underneath that. So it's been under par. There's obviously lots of context and reasons as to why that's the case. But yeah, they're slightly lower than I expected.
Chris, it's been a strange few weeks, hasn't it? I mean, mood has been mostly down. We had 20 minutes of up on Saturday. Yeah. But now that Stuart's left the football club, that's official. I mean, let's talk about Stuart briefly. What will his legacy be remembered for at Norwich City Football Club?
I think mostly on the whole, when people look back, they will be like, Bloomin' heck, he did a lot, he changed a lot. The training ground, for example, is one where I think that could have gone on and on and on and on, and people could have continued to make excuses. And don't get me wrong, Stuart wasn't the only man behind that happening. There was a good team of people. Obviously, Tom Smith was obviously the guy behind the bond, etc. So lots of people came together, but ultimately he spearheaded it. And honestly, I respect what he has achieved for Norwich City in the time that he's done it. And I, of course, naturally, like any supporter, would be disappointed with the 2 dismal Premier League campaigns, particularly the first one under Farker, where we spent absolutely bugger all. And I'm not talk sporting it here, like saying, we should have given it more of a go, but like that was an absolute piss take, really, what we spent that year. And then I think, obviously, it was a shame then that he went against his gut, which is around, for example, hiring managers like Daniel Farker, and then switched it to Dean Smith. I did see the logic in that at the time, but then, of course, that's all now history. Brings in David Wagner, whatever you think about that, it is what it is. But I think ultimately he leaves the club with my respect, really. But what I would counter that with, and as I've posted on social media as well, is I strongly disagree with all, and it is sadly all, of the fan pokey comments that have just been petrol to the fire and needless for the majority of the time. So I think I'm quite disappointed I was disappointed that at Cardiff that he didn't. It wasn't necessarily that he didn't go over to clap the fans, because I don't blame him after all the abuse he's got, obviously. But I just looked at that and I went, what a blooming shame, considering where the club was when he took over to where it is today. And I know that obviously, there's a lot of debt and, table-wise we're in a poor position. But yeah, I think for me it's like, it's a shame with Stuart. But on the whole, he's done a lot of good, and I think it's important that people do appreciate that too.
Connor, I think kind of, the saying, you die a hero or live long enough to become the villain is quite true with Stuart. I mean, if you take his stock in, 2020 compared to now, it's remarkably different.
It is, and I think Chris is right in a lot of what he says. And I had the same at Cardiff. I thought it was a tremendous shame that there wasn't that relationship. And again, I don't blame him, given the way Blackburn went, and a lot of the chance was obviously directed at him. So Yeah, I think ultimately his legacy will be the training ground, and I think what we saw from Stuart is he was a really good disruptor, a really good builder. Probably wasn't the best at building on the stuff that he built, if that makes sense, and that is probably where it's now going to be left to Ben Knapper to try and take on some of the work that he's done. So I think you can probably separate it. I think off the pitch, Norwich are in a remarkably better place than they were in 2017 in terms of infrastructure and even sort of working structures, and they set up a data and innovation department, which I think will be incredibly important moving forward. On the pitch, clearly, recruitment is a lottery at the best of times, I think, and there's no real logic sometimes behind why a player doesn't or does succeed. But clearly, in the last 2 years, it's been under par, and that's going to be the legacy, I think.
I think it's important. The recruitment piece is interesting, right? Because obviously, Emi Buendia, Timo Pukki, like those guys, you would go, yeah, those are the two golden geese that he managed to get to the club. Lots of failed signings as well, which he is accountable for. But I also do feel that in the Premier League, under Daniel Farke, he's actually taken a lot of the flack when there was at least 3 of those players that were signed that were Daniel Farke's men. He adamantly wanted them, and so I do think it's also worth factoring in that, you know, of course Stuart, ultimately it falls down to him. He heads up recruitment, but you know, 3 of those signings at least in the Premier League that were absolute flops were Daniel Farke's men. So I also think that's worth countering in, but I also have to contradict what I've said with all of the good stuff. You have to acknowledge the bad stuff. I thought your conversation with Kieran Maguire, and obviously Kieran Maguire also came on the scrimmage as well and spoke about the debt situation, and you know, it's a case of facts don't care about feelings. We are actually almost in a worse place now financially than we were in back in 2017 when he took over. So, as I've said time after time, All Stars and signs point towards and stripes point towards the Atanasios. Really, we need them to come in and save the day, because we find ourselves in a very murky, challenging financial situation now.
Well, look, I think with all of this stuff, once the dust settles, we'll properly see what his legacy is. Let's fast forward. Stuart's gone, and we thank Stuart for all of the good work and not so much the bad work over that time.
And for coming on the podcast, by the way, because he was the first person of that stature to actually do that, and I thought, you know, fair play. Of course, that was, you know, sing when you're winning and speak when the sun's shining and all that stuff. But ultimately, he rocked up, came into a spare bedroom, took the piss out of my bed sheets, and really opened up candidly about the trials and tribulations of being a sporting director. So we have to give him credit for that.
Let's fast forward to present day. Connor, a confusing afternoon in South Wales, because, you know, I was watching it at home and kind of penning my angry video and well, I've put out there in permanent marker my angry tweets, and I think, you know, I stand by everything I said, but it's incredible how a mood and a sentiment can change in 4 minutes of football. We could have quite easily lost that 2-1, and I think would have probably gone, actually we deserved that, and actually we've won the game 3-2. 6 points off the playoffs, dare I say, and everything looks slightly...
You're a naughty boy, you are.
Slightly clearer. It's amazing how football works.
Yeah, it is. I certainly didn't see it coming. I don't think too many people did with 10 minutes to go, if I'm completely honest. And before that, I remember John Rowe having a pretty good chance at the near post that the keeper saved. But beyond that, I can't remember. Danny Bart, I think, had a couple of headers. But beyond that, I'm really struggling to think of kind of clear-cut chances. But yeah, it was kind of a result in a 10-minute spell that defied the form book, that defied feelings, emotions, everything really. And it was really good, I think, because the players have had to withstand a lot of accusations about application and whether they care, quite frankly. And I think that was proof that they can do it, and probably underpins a lot of the frustration, because we know what the quality is within this group. I did think Cardiff were pretty lacklustre, if I'm honest. They made a triple change on 71 minutes. They basically took off 2 of the front 3, Robinson and Bowler, who were excellent, and that kind of changed the game, I felt. Yeah, I think, and this is where it gets very difficult in the wider conversation, because in isolation it's a really, really good win. In the wider picture, and this probably, I don't want to lean too much into a conversation we might have in a little bit, but it's obviously, what does it change and does it change too much, and that obviously is up for other people to decide.
I think we need to give Norwich more. We need to give those players more credit. We do,
because for 2 wins in 11 games.
No, for that Cardiff performance, because we have rightly slammed them in recent weeks, particularly Blackburn, where I think it was totally valid to question the endeavour of a few of those lads that are on the pitch. Just absolutely chucked it against Blackburn. Really lacked character. But my God, did we see that against Cardiff? And I felt that we saw it in an abundance. Of course, you have little slices of luck that go your way, etc. But we have to give them credit. And and I need to say this as well, Connor. Your match reviews have been absolutely outstanding this season. Big reason why we wanted to get you on, and I really agreed with everything that you said in that. But for me, I felt we did actually deserve all 3 points, and give them credit because Cardiff haven't lost a game at home since August, right? They're no pushovers. I think they were like 7 unbeaten at home or something, Connor, correct me if I'm wrong?
Played 7-1-5, yeah.
So, it's not an easy place to rock up. Don't get me wrong, and you know what I'm like. I absolutely think that Norwich City should be beating teams like Cardiff away. Don't give a shit if I offend anyone. We should be beating teams like Cardiff away. But it was a good result. It was the second half performance was decent. Take your yellow and green glasses off. Remove the eye test. Whatever the Yellow Army, who were absolute heroes by the way, that travelled to Cardiff. Whatever they thought. Looking at it statistically as well, we were the team that deserved all 3 points. I think I'd seen we had 5 big chances, Connor, compared to their 3. And they took them. It was a great. The winner, for example, it was a lovely bit of work from Dimmy and Johnny Rowe, and then obviously Adam Eder again, who I'm so pleased scored the winner. I don't know what your thoughts are on Adam Eder, Connor, but I was buzzing that he got the winner. Yeah, likewise, and just made a really important impact away from the goal because Cardiff were sat pretty deep in a pretty compact block, and he just stretched it a little bit, and that probably opened up a little bit more space for Norwich. So yeah, really impactful stuff. But again, I was probably sat there going, why wasn't this guy brought on against Blackburn? So it is one of those, and I do feel for him because actually you look at the amount of starts that he's had over his career. He's not played a lot of football. I think there's still a rawness to him, which we could get into the whys and why nots of why that's the case, but there is a really good player in there, and I think his goal shows, as the goal against Hull did at the start of the season, there's an instinctive finisher in there who knows how to kind of smell a goal. So I'm a big Adam Eder fan.
Look, we won the game, and I don't want to be too downbeat because it's a rare win, so we need
to enjoy this whilst we've had it.
But I think it's important to look at wider context here, Connor. Norwich are still in a position in the table they don't want to be. Zoe Webber has said publicly that the aim is top 6 this season, if not promotion. So we're well below expectation there. Let's take it back to 2 o'clock on Saturday. You're in a chilly South Wales, and you see a defensive line of Poeta, Bart, Warner, and Fisher. What's running through your head at that point?
Honestly,
I'd had a little while to digest it because I think we'd heard murmurings that was going to be the case, and bold I think was my first thought, but there's a fine line, isn't there, between bold and reckless. I wasn't particularly surprised. It felt to me, and it has felt to me in team selections in the last few weeks, it's trying to find a formula and hoping that something sticks and clicks, and maybe rather than logic sometimes. And I think it after 45 minutes that probably panned out the way that I expected.
For me, PP at left back is insanity. I'm sorry, you've lost your head. You have. He's not big enough. He's not defensively minded. I don't know why we continue to persist with trying him in that position because it doesn't work. I mean, for the first goal, he was practically over the bloody English border again. He was miles out of position. And I don't want to single out players, but I feel for him because he just shouldn't be played there. And for the second goal, he didn't even bloody jump. Obviously, there's a bit of a debate. Was it Danny Bart's man or was it not? But for me, he doesn't even jump. And I'm like, come on. And then, of course, lo and behold, he brings on his 2 better fullbacks in the Emperor of Norfolk and Jack Stacey. And we go and get all 3 points. So again, you think, why the bloody hell did we not start with that? We would have been so much more well structured-ish, and there's just experience there, isn't there? Like this is a big game. You need to win the game.
I think if you look at that back four, Kellen Fisher, who's made 2 championships. That was his second championship start. Same with Jaden Warner. Poeta, who's not a left back, and then Danny Bart, who's making his first start. So I mean, there's a lot of sort of strands to pull together into that back four, and it was a big decision.
I do want to bring up Danny Bart. Right, we've got to talk about that. And you said on your match review, Connor, doesn't it just show why on earth have we waited to get to this point to give him his first start? Because he looked so good in the air. He looks like a proper defender, you know, like, and almost a bit Grant Hanley-esque when he first came into the football club. He's got that bit about him. What are your thoughts on the Danny Batth situation?
I jokingly referred to him as Paolo Maldini about 5 minutes in, because that's sort of the level of status that he's grown, isn't it, from not playing. But yeah, I think he is what he is. He's very dependable, reliable. I think he took responsibility. I don't think we've seen enough for that in the Norwich back line. And as I said, the situation he was dropped into, I mean, it was carnage, really. For him to be dropped into that, and he had to lean on all of his, I think, 302 games in the Championship to get through it. And I think as the game wore on, and of course he ended the game with 3 different players around him than what he started with, so the circumstances were just remarkable. But I thought you said airily, I thought he was excellent. I felt it was probably a game that suited him, because Meite isn't one necessarily who wanted to stretch him behind, and I think there was some vulnerabilities when Cardiff kind of were looking to get in beyond. But in terms of, you know, airily and what I would call kind of your conventional centre back traits, I thought he was really reliable and dependable and competitive.
I'm glad you added that there in Connor, because I feel like he dealt particularly second half with long balls and stuff, but I think we're being slightly unfair on Gibson and Duffy, who've also in those instances I think done quite well. It's when the ball is on the floor, they're looking to get in behind, and actually when they did that on the 2 occasions, we conceded. I mean, we were so open in that first half. Just moving the story along slightly, Connor, to Mr. Wagner, who you have to look at deep into the eyes every week, and I think I'm no body language expert, as none of us are, but I think the way that he's been talking and acting over the past couple of weeks, I saw a man who was broken after Blackburn. I don't know if you think that's the case. Did you sense a change after that win against Cardiff?
Yeah, a bit. I think there was visibly some relief. He was quite. I think Chris Gorham said emotional. I would agree. I was stood next to Chris when he was doing that interview, and I think there was that sense. It's understandable, the amount of pressure that he's been under for that kind of reaction. And I think to his credit, and this is something that isn't true of all managers who end up in the situation. Perhaps wasn't true of his predecessor. He hasn't been spiky. He has answered all the questions. He's engaged with all the questions. He's taken the questions for what they are. He understands why they're being asked. So I think there is that emotional intelligence to him. And I would just reiterate, I think irrespective of views about whether changes need to be made or not, there is a very good human. Not that it means much in football, I know, but there is a very good human being in there. And I think he has, irrespective of what you make of the job he's done, I think he has handled himself with real professionalism and integrity. So yeah, I did see a change and a switch, and it did look like a weight had been lifted. But as always in football, these things are only ever temporary, aren't they?
A weight has been lifted off of our shoulders. I mean, my Sunday morning and Saturday evening was far more pleasurable having one.
It's weird, wasn't it?
It's yeah.
Not used to this. Whoa, a win.
I know, it's really strange. Where does this leave Wagner now? Because we've been public, as I think most people have, that a change is probably required. Some would now say, I think it's probably still a minority, but some would say, injuries have been a factor. We've just beaten Cardiff away. We're on the up. There's a nice run of fixtures coming. We should remain with Wagner. Or are you still adamant that Knapper comes in and his first job should be to dismiss Wagner?
As always, I want to stamp on that injuries point. I think it's an excuse. I do. Every team in the league suffers injuries at some stage. Yeah. I mean, Blackburn rocked up to our place with 5 players out or ill, and they won comfortably, right? And so I still think you can set up well, you can be organised, you can be aggressive.
But I mean, also on that point, I had looked the other day at the starting 11 that beat Huddersfield 4-0. So it was Gunn in goal.
Yeah.
He's obviously missed, 3 and a bit games, 4 games.
Which has been a big miss.
Has been a big miss, yeah. Stacey played, Duffy played, Gibson played. Duffy obviously suspended, Gibson's missed a couple of games. Yeah. Yanulis played. Then you had obviously the 2 midfielders, Sarah and McLean. Rowe played, Fashnak played, and then it was the front 2. So I mean, a lot of those players, the core of those players, have been available throughout this run. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I agree with you, mate, and I'm pleased that you. It's actually nice to have some sense on this podcast, Connor, because you're backing me up for once, compared to this fella here. So the injuries thing, I think, it's an easy thing to lean on, and don't get me wrong. As always, Sergeant Barnes, there's some fear factor there with Championship defences. They do stretch the back lines. They do help us get forwards. But but we've still scored most of our goals from midfield with them in the team anyway. So I'm not buying that. Where does this leave David Wagner? I posted at 2-1 down that Ben Knapper should pick up the phone and dismiss him that evening. And it was emotional, but I still feel that that's the case. And actually it's for the case, which is different to maybe what some people think. I know that you're quite hard on it, Jack, but I actually feel sorry for David Wagner, because he's a nice bloke. He's ever the professional. He's not slagging off the fans. He genuinely really likes this football club and wants it to work. And I just think there's this element of put the guy out of his misery, because I think he's a dead man walking, to be honest with you, with regards to his job. So I think it's unfair. But then I can also see the sense in getting it through to this international break, because nothing's going to change with, say, Narcissus in charge, for example, with the same coaching team. So maybe removing David wouldn't necessarily help the situation. But yeah, with me, I don't think this changes with him in charge. Unfortunately, because I was all aboard the Wagner wagon. Trust me, I really was, and I was probably one of the last people to quote unquote turn again. But I just think it is time to get some fresh ideas. I think Ben Knapper will change it. As to whether he'll change it, when this podcast is released or not, I don't think so. But I do think there's a chance that it could happen this week, because it makes sense. You can't, as you said on your review, Connor, right? You'd like to think that Ben Knapper won't just look at that win at Cardiff and see a shite QPR coming up next and go, well, here you go, we could be back in the playoffs. Like, surely not, looking at how easily we've folded.
But also, I think with sporting directors, and this is where you're kind of crossing your fingers and hoping a little bit. But I hope whatever decision, and I think it's been kind of made to be quite binary, and it's either you back him or you sack him, kind of, this kind of bit. I think there's a lot of grey in between that, which I think is probably where he'll end up, if I'm honest. But irrespective of what happened on the last 10 minutes at Cardiff, because if that game ended 2-1 as it could have, and if the ball didn't drop to Adam Ida's foot and it ends in a point, I think the discourse is the same, that a lot of fans would have been calling for him to go. So I think you almost have to take a step back. You have to use all the evidence. He's a data guy. I'm sure he is doing that. It's 2-11, like you said. It's the defensive numbers have been horrendous now for quite a period of time. So I think there are pros and cons to whichever way, but I think what is desperately needed is clarity for David, more than anyone else, for the players. But there needs to be a sense of direction. I think it probably comes down to alignment. Does David Wagner align with what Ben Knapper wants to do moving forward? And if the answer is no, then probably irrespective of results, really, you have to change.
I guess to a degree though, Connor, we've already got that clarity, in a sense of Wagner's come out, he said he has the backing of the board. I know that comes from more of a Delia Smith element to what do the Atanasios believe about this, and Knapper coming in. But Knapper, I think I'm right in saying, was involved in those kind of discussions. So all we know, if we're going solely off what's been said publicly by the football club, there is support for David Wagner here. Yeah,
and that was definitely the line heading into the weekend, and definitely the line that they wanted to stress heading into the weekend. And it is really interesting that I think David Wagner offered that up. I wasn't in the press conference, but I think I've watched it back, and it was in one of the first two answers to questions that he served that up, and I can understand why he did it. I would also say that ultimately it's probably Delia is never going to make, or Michael, and they're never going to make that decision on a head coach. No. It would always be Stuart Webber, as it was formerly, as was the case with Daniel Farke, going to them and presenting a case, and then the board have to agree or disagree, but it'd probably be quite rare for them to disagree. So Ben Knapper's in a similar boat. So irrespective of maybe what the majority shareholders think, if he feels strongly about it and he wants to go and make his case, he can do that, and they can put a vote on it. So I probably wouldn't read too much into that, if I'm honest.
One thing that Ben Knapper does have to make is a decision either way. Do we stick with him or don't we? And he will be judged based on that decision very early on in his tenure.
He will, and I think there's as I said, I think there's also this, again, it's been presented very binary. I think there is probably not that I necessarily think it's where you should sit at this moment in time, but I just wonder if he'll go need a period of assessment, and all of this kind of thing. I know he's taken a lot of soundings from other people in and around the game on David Wagner, and I think a lot of those, from what I gather, have been relatively positive. But again, what he hasn't been able to do is watch a David Wagner coaching session. He hasn't been able to speak to senior players. I'd imagine all of these processes are ones that will take a little bit of time. So I think, and to be fair, this perception's not been created by him, even though he was involved, but this kind of decision to accelerate his arrival, I think a lot of fans, and I don't blame them for doing it, have looked at it and gone, right, he's coming in to sack David Wagner. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think it will be probably about, obviously, looking at that and coming to a decision on that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that will necessarily be the outcome. It might be, it might not. If
you had the decision, which way would you go?
I think I'd probably make a change. I think there's as I said, I think the narrative is there's enough of a kind of reason to do it. Based on kind of what I've seen in the last few weeks, I don't think one win really changes much, and I don't think I walked away from Cardiff thinking all the issues are solved. Norwich still had to score 3 goals to win a game. That's not sustainable in the long term, and the evidence of the last few weeks shows that if you concede at the rate of knots that Norwich are, you lose more games of football than you win. So this is where you would hope that a lot of the data is being used and crunched, and the trends are being looked at. I'm sure he will take into consideration the injuries. I agree with you. I don't think it is a crisis. I understand why it's been offered as an excuse, not an excuse, a reason. But I think and felt and have felt for a while that Devery's probably a greater argument now for a fresh sense of direction.
I'm hearing lots of good things about Ben Knapper from people within the game, not just at Norwich City Football Club, but beyond that. I'm grateful for the fact they've given me that sort of intel. And I'm really excited about him. And what I would be bullish with is that if he is a data man, he will make a change. He'll make a change. The data is abysmal. The performances are, whatever you think of the performances and the results in isolation, fine. But the absolutely critical one, the huge red flag waving in Ben Knapper's face, is that we've conceded the most goals in the league. And Norwich City Football Club, and I know it's arrogant, but it's just, I don't think it's an unfair expectation to say Norwich City should not be the team that's conceding the most goals in the league, considering where we've been in recent seasons. It is disgraceful. So that's the number, and I'll be stunned if Ben Knapper looks at what's gone on this season and gone, yeah, right, I'll stick this out a little bit longer. For me, that just doesn't make sense. So I think, as you say, Jack, you rightly highlighted, there's a lot of pressure on Ben to make a change. What I do find interesting is the dynamic between the supporters and the club is obviously fractured. I think that's fair to say. And I think, Connor, it was you that said in your match review that the majority would want to have a change now. And is it a case of, the writing's on the wall, and what is the chance that Norwich fans just all of a sudden switch back to Wagner's at the wheel and off we go to Wembley? I can't see it. I'd love to be wrong, and I need to be clear for certain people that watch this podcast. I would love to be wrong. I would love it if David Wagner stuck 2 fingers up to me and went, there you go, Chris Reeve, you were wrong. I just don't think I will be.
I think it's difficult when you get in this situation with a head coach, and Chris Sutton's written about it before in columns for us, and when a fan base turns and you look at it and you look at the run of games, even, let's say he wins the next 2, if Norwich lose the one after that, then you're kind of in a similar situation. That becomes very difficult for a head coach, I think.
I think it's worth noting here, because the majority of this chat has been surrounding Wagner. This isn't the only issue, and it probably isn't the biggest issue at the football club. But in terms of the way I'm looking at it, Connor, is I haven't seen enough good change in the past 10 games to go, this is moving in a good direction. I'm still seeing the same issues. I'm still not really seeing an identity about Norwich.
Which is exactly why I think to make a decision based on 2 goals in 4 minutes at Cardiff, that would be emotional. And I think as a sporting director, you can't be reactive in that sense. You can't say, well, on 81 minutes I was going to sack him, but now they've won the game, I might just give it a bit more time. I hope whatever decision it is, and I'm sure Ben Knapper will come out and do some speaking at some point this week. I hope that it was made probably before the Cardiff game, and it's almost becoming irrelevant, because I think if you slot that Cardiff game, let's say in the middle of those 4 defeats that Norwich have had, I don't think this discussion is the same. So it shouldn't be the same just because a win is stapled onto the end of it.
And if we're looking at this from Wagner's perspective, is there a world where he goes, actually, like, I was here to do a job alongside Stewart, my thought process and my identity doesn't align with that of Knapper, and actually now's a good time to get out? Do you think that's the case?
Possibly. There's always that possibility. I think the alignment point is an interesting one. I would probably expect that to come more from Ben Knapper, because I think it's very rare in this day and age for a head coach to go, yeah, do you know what, I'm not going to do it, because jobs are difficult. Jobs, who knows, David Wagner might not get a job at this level again. I think you have to almost, if you're a head coach, be very wary of that, and you always have to think that you can ride out bad spells. And I'm sure he will think the same. And you know, as you said, Chris, it's up to him to prove that he can do that. The evidence is weighed completely against him. It's up to him to try and turn it back if he's given that time.
If nothing else, he should be sacked just to keep that stat you alerted us to on
it's a great stat, isn't it?
Yeah, the 40-40-40.
So Schalke, young boys, and now Norwich. He's managed 40 games, was sacked in his last 2. He's now managed 40 games in charge of Norwich. So for those that like symmetry, yeah.
I actually want to add something else in involved just quickly before we go to the questions on X. Thank you as always for all of those contributions, statements, rants and raves, etc. I'm actually grateful to David Wagner, which sounds really weird me coming out with that, but you've got to remember this absolute state that he found Norwich in post Dean Smith. And
was it a state in the top 6?
It was a state,
decent
mate.
squad.
Well, in my opinion, it was. I think he was brought in as a band-aid, right, to try to get this engine going again, which I keep referred to it as that under Dean Smith as well. And you know, we limped across the line last season. Obviously, it was 1 win in 11 at the end of that campaign, and so I think there's probably he's not an idiot. He'll know that he's a lucky man to still be in a job. He'll be aware of that, considering the numbers. And I agree with Connor. There's no way he walks away, because, you know, reputationally at the moment, I would be surprised if he got another job in the Championship.
But also financially as well. Why would, like, none of us in that situation. He's got a family to look after.
Yeah, of course.
You know, you would wait for a payoff.
Okay, let's move on to the Twitter questions. We'll start with Liz, and this is an interesting one we haven't spoken about since probably the last time Connor was on the podcast. Chris, Liz says, priority is for Knapper to improve relations with press. Webber's failure to acknowledge the away fans on Saturday stales the warm send-off players gave him in his guard of honour. Fans need to get behind the club and can only do this with effective press information. What's the relationship between club and, I guess we'll call you, mainstream media, shall we? Is that
I guess
more official than TNC?
It sounds like we're going down some sort of conspiracy theorist. But to be honest, since the summer, it's been better. I think I would say, and obviously we're extremely grateful for that. It's obviously difficult, and I understand why it's difficult in difficult spells, and it's difficult for us all, because none of us like to be having conversations about people's jobs and positions and all of that kind of thing, and or being particularly critical. But I think at the same time you kind of have to say what you see. So it's significantly improved from when I last came on. Is it the best it's ever been? No, and I think probably both sides would admit that. But yeah, it's there's certainly a lot more dialogue happening now, which is positive.
Going back to what Liz actually said, though, it's a really important point, right? When Ben Knapper comes in, he needs to understand that the relationship between the supporters and the club is fractured. Let's not beat around the bush or cover it with any bullshit that after a couple of wins it'll all be happy-go-lucky again. You know, this club has, you know, I wouldn't use the word rotting, but it has been slowly but steadily declining over the last couple of seasons, on and off the pitch. You know, I just want to reiterate again, grateful for what Stuart did, but the needless fan pokes from him, you know, it did create this discourse between the supporters and the club. And so I'm really, again, another reason why I'm really optimistic about Ben Knapper coming in is that I understand that he's not the bloke to do lots of outward speaking, to make big, bold, brash statements. You know, perhaps even a little bit more introverted than extroverted as Stuart as a leader. And so I actually do think that Ben Knapper coming in will begin to heal the relationship between the fans and the club. And of course, you know Connor's position, and obviously BBC Radio Norfolk as well. You know, it's so important to have the press. I don't mean onside as in, you know, keeping them on side, but I mean, like, you know, having a good relationship with them is really important, isn't it?
I think that's an interesting point Chris makes, Connor, in terms of Stuart was unique from a sporting director sense. He was quite public. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of comms and stuff. And going back to Liz's point, it almost played into that weird scenario where you've got a sporting director at an away ground being given a guard of honour. I mean, when you're, writing your live blog or whatever you were doing at the end of the game, and you look up and you're seeing a guard of honour, and you're going, oh, who's walking down there? And you see Stuart sort of emerge from the end. You must be thinking, have I had a few too many kind of Welsh lagers?
I thought Chris Gorham was going to have a heart attack when he was calling it on BBC Radio Norfolk. He's like, well, I don't quite. Yes, Stuart Webber. I was like, okay, fine.
Well, I think the shock came really is that I was trying to think the other day. The last time I think I saw Stuart Webber on the pitch at the end of the game would have been in the title celebrations at Villa.
Yeah,
so it's extremely rare for that to happen. And the way it kind of played out, David Wagner has not really got mentioned, but he also didn't necessarily go over to the away fans, which again probably understandable in the situation. He probably wanted to let the players have that moment as well, which as we've spoken about earlier, they absolutely deserved. And so I almost thought like someone had come on the pitch from the crowd. Who's that? And then you obviously noticed that it was Webber. And then the way it played out was they sort of hung back a bit. The players kind of filed their way back towards the tunnel, and there were lots of hugs and high fives for him. I was probably surprised there was a guard of honour. That did catch me out a little bit. But I think they would probably argue it's representative of their internal view. He brought a lot of them to the club. He gave a lot of them pretty decent contracts as well, if we're honest. And I think there is a lot of respect internally for Stuart Webber and what he's done, because as he wrote in his endless statement, it felt like it was well written and well crafted. But he's brought a lot of them to the football club. He's in some cases promoted a lot of people, and he's protected a lot of people as well. So I can understand why they did it, but. Yeah, I understand also why, from a fan's perspective, it maybe didn't read particularly well. He's
certainly taken a few bullets for people over the years, that's for sure. Particularly management and other people, and I think you've nicely summarised it, Connor. There, it was brilliant. Harv says, statement: the Atanasios are not the magic bullet we have made them out to be. Self-funding will continue. He is not liked by Brewers fans and doesn't invest in the team. Now, Connor, you were obviously the outlet that initially broke that news of the Yanks coming to town. How do you think the perception is of the Atanasios now, and what impact can they realistically make now over the next season? Well, because we need them to make an impact immediately, right? Because we're in trouble at the moment.
Yeah. So I think. I'll preface this. I don't know a lot about baseball, so I'm.
No one does.
It feels to me like Rounders, but with an American accent. But
well,
I'll probably offended.
That's all the Americans switched off.
I'm really. I've never watched it, so I don't know. I've played it on Wii Sports once. When
but you can cheat on that. You can
a bit. Yeah. But what I kind of, you look at their financial situation. That is a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Norwich aren't that, so the levels of spending I don't think are particularly comparable. So to say that they don't put a lot of money into the Brewers, so they won't do that at Norwich, I think it's a slightly different situation. I think the self-funding point, and we've seen this in the accounts, Norwich aren't really now a self-funding club. I think that's the evidence of that. They've got a essentially £40 million loan to Mark Atanasio, which if he does eventually assume control, will probably be written off. But that's not the point. It's not what self-funding is. So they have moved away from that. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. They clearly have the finances to make an impact. It would be to what level, and certainly I feel it would be to a higher level than what we've seen at the moment. So that it's not always positive just throwing money at it, but certainly in modern day football that is sort of the norm, whether we like it or not.
I think that's an important point around not comparing Norwich to the Brewers. I'd kind of seen this discourse on Twitter from the Brewers fans around, we want the Atanasios out, blah, blah, blah. And actually, I think when digging into it, they'd offered their manager, head coach, whatever they call them, a £5 million or $5 million contract. He wanted 7, so he just left. And actually, these are completely
different.
And
it's very different situation, because isn't it like trades and whatnot over there? So it's very different from people having to buy stuff out and whatnot. So
I did shake my head a little bit when I saw a bit of this on social last. I think some people have just they've jumped on something. I saw that the post that was being banded about, and it was from a random Brewers fan. It's not a journalist or someone particularly in the know. And Norwich fans have jumped and going, oh well, they hate them and da 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 da. I'm like, blooming heck. I found this quite interesting, right? Is that the Atanasios have turned the Brewers from a £225 million company to a £1.4 billion company, right? So it's not like they've taken over and stagnated.
They're just not comparable levels from where Norwich are right now.
Yeah.
And also I think they've again, I don't really understand how these things work, but I think it's like 5 out of 6 they've been in kind of like the playoffs for is it the World Series. So competitively they have improved them. Yeah. They've improved them from a business perspective as well. I'm not here to defend them, it's not my job, but I'm just not sure that they are comparisons that we should be making.
I do think a lot of the angst also, Jack, does come from the fact that this legal process has taken yonks to happen, right? And I think Norwich fans have expected it to, for some reason, take a shorter amount of time. And I think the angst and the worry has been because of the silence, right? But I anticipate that to change. I anticipate that to change certainly in the next month, but I would suspect in the next couple of weeks. And I think that the Norwich fans will realise that the Atanasios aren't turned off, aren't wanting out, or are not interested or not going to commit. They are definitely all in on Norwich City Football Club still.
I think I completely understand that point and agree, but we can't pin all hope on these guys. Essentially, these are people that leverage debt. They are in this because financially it works for them, and they don't care about Norwich City as much as we do. Look, the Atanasios could change the pathway for Norwich City and we could go on this amazing run, but it would be remiss of us to pin all hope on them and go, they've got cash, it will all be fine. That might not work like that. Just moving on then, let's get a question in from Ben Jones. He says, if you were in Knapper's position, would you stick or twist with Wagner? I think we've already had that comment from you, Connor, but if you would twist, who would you appoint? Names being bandied about, Lampard, Potter, people like that. I've seen a lot of traction with Frank Lampard, and we had it after
we can't get Potter, by the way. There's not a chance we get
Can
Potter.
I just say a fun fact though? Graham Potter did coach Ben Knapper. He was his captain at university. Ben Knapper was his captain at university.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Hello.
No, I'm not telling you there's a chance. But there is a relationship there between the two.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Lampard.
Hull Uni, I believe.
At Hull.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything in Lampard?
I think it's there's still a manager in post, so I think naturally the situation.
An uncomfortable shuffle of the chair there, Connor.
I think the situation that Norwich are in at the moment, there's always going to be people getting active and sensing an opportunity, particularly those who aren't in work. Norwich have clearly had an interest before. I think that's obvious. They went to speak to him after Daniel Farke had been sacked, so. I would probably expect him to appear on a list somewhere if they did make a decision, but obviously they haven't yet, and there's not a vacancy, so it's pretty irrelevant as a conversation right now.
Well battered away.
I'll save Connor and move things on quickly. Of course, Cardiff was a comeback win, and Jack Wright at Jack Birdbrain on X says, what is the most satisfying Nodge comeback of all time? I'll start with you, Connor.
Forest.
I was going to say the exact
3-0 down.
Yes.
Felt like it had gone. That was tremendous.
Mate, my top was off that day. I couldn't believe it.
I was wearing a parka that day, so I know how cold it was. My parka was firmly.
Were you working for the?
I wasn't at that point. So I was fan at that point. Yeah, it was remarkable. Yeah, and what made it good, and that probably gets to the point of where we're at now, is it was at a point where the connection was reached. No one had left. I think it was like they were 3-0 down with like 12 minutes to go. And everyone was still there, and there was still maybe this hope. I wouldn't necessarily say it was belief, but yeah, that was. Certainly one of the loudest I've heard Carrow Road.
O'Neill scored that day.
He did.
Wasn't potentially on the line one like at Cardiff.
It was 2, wasn't it? Didn't he? Was there a cross as well?
I wouldn't like to comment on that.
That was probably his last goal for Norwich, wasn't
it? You silly boy.
I did.
Silly boy.
Hi, Arnold. I did giggle, Chris.
You say hi.
I did giggle. I was going through Twitter. We just won. I mean, so much to discuss around how the board looks, changing head coach, what happens, and I'm seeing you coming out with, was it Onel's goal or not?
No, it's not a question.
And I thought Rob Butler's point was about well done for raising the most irrelevant.
No, it's not a question. It's a statement. Like all I'm doing is I'm just making it clear that
the ball crossed the line.
No, it hadn't. Look at the goal. Look at where the ball is. It wasn't over the line. It's Onel Hernandez's goal.
Are you on like 20% of his goal bonus or something?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Answer the Nodge comeback one. I'll throw another one at you.
Yeah.
What about the the Millwall comeback. Is that your comeback?
I think that was that about 4 years ago, Saturday or something.
Same
I saw
season,
some. That was brilliant. I'm just thinking, I don't know if it was necessarily a comeback, going back to Lambert days, Derby County, Simeon Jackson last minute.
Yeah, it was.
Have we gone behind in that game?
I think it was 2-2.
So I'm not sure if that was necessarily a comeback.
It's obviously Middlesbrough back in the day.
Well, I was going to say, I think that. Yeah, I think actually Middlesbrough I preferred to
that was
Forest
4-1,
actually.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of more modern day Premier League comebacks.
We just haven't.
There must have been some. Was it Newcastle when Olsen scored really late on, left-footed volley?
Yes. Yeah, into the bottom right.
Yeah, and I remember at that point thinking Norwich are staying up.
I thought the same,
and it went very wrong from that point.
Yeah.
I think either in terms of last modern era, Millwall probably was the one for me, because I think at that point you started to go, ooh, like there's a real chance here. When you get that belief in, you go from being someone just in and around the mix to going, oh, I think we've got something. We've got all of the assets we need.
Let's try and get positive. James Partridge, name of the podcast, by the way. Congratulations, James. He says, positive. Apart from Leicester, we've scored in every other game this season in both league and cup. If we could get the defence sorted, we'd be much better off. Connor, agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I really agree. I think the data shows that. And you had Dean Ashton on last week before, and he made the point.
He was watching.
I do watch sometimes.
Connor Southwell watches the podcast.
But it was what, 7th best in the Championship and one of the worst defences. So it shows it's not a top 2 attack, but there's certainly evidence that if you could stop conceding goals, that Norwich would improve pretty rapidly. But also, as I said earlier, this sort of moment that they're in, that you need to score 3 goals to win a game, is not sustainable. So that does need to change, and there's probably been little evidence of it changing at the moment.
Let's hit you with another positive statement from Ashley A Snelling 00 on X. He says, Christian Fastnacht, Championship Player of the Season. Heard it here first. Of course not. But Connor, a positive at the weekend was, of course, Fussy got a goal on his 30th B day. A player that's perhaps been a bit hot and cold this season, maybe adapting to the English game. What have you thought of his season so far and his performance against Cardiff?
Yeah, I think there's enough in there to say that he's a really intelligent footballer. That spell he had just towards the end of Norwich's really good run at the start of the season, he looked terrific and looked kind of above Championship standard. I think he's drifted.
Southampton away, wasn't it? I think it was. Where he scored.
And there was also a home game, might have been Millwall, where he looked really good. But he has kind of drifted a little bit. I think that's sort of natural, given that he's never played football outside Switzerland, and the Championship is quite something to get dropped into. So I think all of that is quite natural. He's obviously not been helped because he's been in and out of the team a little bit as well. But evidence there that I think 6 months down the line we'll look at that and say, yeah, that was quite a clever bit of recruitment.
I think the nice thing with Fastnacht is, he's seemingly quite productive in terms of when he's on the pitch. There's assists, there's goals, and I think that's been the criticism of other wingers. They look quick, they look fancy, but actually when it comes to delivering in terms of numbers, it's been a struggle. I think Fastnacht's been really impressive. Let's get a question from I Just Love Norwich. Great name.
Good name.
Connor, why have people gone from hating Ida's guts to now every time he scores chanting his name? I don't think he's got any better or worse. I guess this is a perception question, isn't it, of the debate of Ida will keep on, ploughing on until, I guess, Sargent or Barnes returns. Do you think he's taken the chance of the top 2 strikers at the club being injured, or do you think he'll look back at this time with slight regret?
For me, it was all about, and I'd frame it slightly differently. So I would say, has he been given a chance to take that opportunity? And probably in recent weeks he hasn't. And part of that is because I think Hwang has shown bits of improvement. I thought he was one of 2, maybe being kind, players against Blackburn who looked okay.
You are being
I'm using okay. I'm not going stronger than okay. And at Sunderland there were signs as well, and he scored a pretty good goal. I think he does better striker than Hwang from what I've seen, and I think from a club perspective, and this is just my personal view as well, it's always better to push a player that you have and are keeping and are trying to develop rather than one on loan. But I go back to the point I made earlier, he's not played a lot of football for someone of his age. When you compare it to, and Max is a slightly unrealistic one I think to compare, because he was an exception rather than the norm, but certainly you could put other players of his age bracket in a similar place to him, and they've played significantly more football. I remember looking earlier in the season at one point, and he was, I think, less or fewer than 20 starts he's made for Norwich City, which is just not enough to really say definitively either way whether he's good enough or not. And this comes back to probably his development and why. And there were reasons from a Norwich City perspective. They had Teemu Pukki. It was very difficult to get strikers to the club knowing that they weren't going to play. So they had to keep Adam Ida in a sense. But also, in a best case scenario, he probably would have gone elsewhere and gone out on loan. So has he improved? Probably not to the levels that anyone expected. But I still think, I don't think this is a closed debate. I still think there's plenty of room for him to grow into. It's just about, does he get a run of games that enables him to do that? And I actually think Ashley Barnes coming back from injury after the international break will be massive for him.
I agree. He was bullish against Cardiff. He used his body weight well. He used his physicality.
I tell you what I liked about it, he was angry.
Yeah,
and that's what
kind of good.
Yeah, good anger. Good. Yeah, and we've not seen that enough from him. I think for me, it's always, and watching Adam Ida, it's always felt like there needs to be something that happens for him. Yeah. He needs to have a positive contribution, and then it's like, well, here we go. Here's the player.
It feels like we've had that. Everton in the Premier League, Hull first game of the season.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a straight line as he needs to score a goal and then his trajectory will be like that. I think this is within games. He needs to. So at Huddersfield, it was a cross for John Rowe, and then from there he looked a different player. And Saturday he kind of created it for himself, but it feels like he needs a moment within games rather than it being this sort of up confidence, down confidence thing.
We know he's a confidence player though, right? So I'm of the faith that when Norwich start to actually play average football, at least he will start to perform better. I need to really, I want to be quite aggressive back to that post.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I do. I think I'm delighted that the crowd have gone the other way with Adam Ida now, because some of the abuse.
I think that's harsh on fans.
No, it's not. No, I don't care, Jack. No, well, fine, all right. Well, I absolutely disagree with you as well. Then, why are we? Of course, we should be celebrating the fact that we're supporting a player. I love the fact that we're shouting Ida, fucking brilliant. Do you know what as well was interesting? What was the home game before Blackburn, Connor, where Wagner took him off?
Middlesbrough,
and the fans booed the fact that Wagner took him off, and we were like, oh, I hope Adam thinks that that's not about him, and I think that speaks volumes. I think it's brilliant that we're supporting Adam Ida now. Like, we've got him. He is our striker. He's a better striker than Hwang. We've seen what he can do against Cardiff and Hull, and he just needs that confidence. So let's not be like, oh, well, why are we supporting him now? Good, we should be supporting him.
But there's also a perception point. I remember earlier on in the season when Ashley Barnes rightly was getting a lot of praise, and I think at that point he'd scored the same amount of goals as Adam Ida, and the conversation was very different between the two. So it is perceptions, and I'm glad that he's going away to change.
I agree, and I think the frustration towards Ida, and whether that's frustration that's tipped into criticism, has been, we know the potential of this guy. I was chatting to a United fan the other week who'd watched Norwich on the telly. He's going, why is Adam not scoring more goals? He's tall, he's relatively quick, he's powerful, he's got a good shot on him. He's got all of the attributes here. And maybe it is that mental aspect. Just going away from the questions now, Connor. Norwich's next game, QPR at home on the 25th of November. I know you're not a mind reader, but you're close to the inner workings of the football club. How do you think things will look at 3 o'clock at Carrow Road on that day? Will there be a different person in the dugout? What will Knapper's first week or so in charge have been? What decisions will have been made?
This will be clipped up.
Okay. I don't expect there to be a change. It was my view pre-Cardiff, and it's my view post-Cardiff. I think, as I've said a few times, that Ben Knapper will probably fall into that grey zone of, I want a bit more time to assess it, and I don't want to say definitively yet which way I want to go. I might be completely wrong on that, but that's my feeling based on anything that I know. But there's certainly, as I said, pre-Cardiff, the noises were, David said this publicly, but I think the general noises were, no, we support David, we believe he can turn it around. Zoe Webber wrote about it in a programme column as well. So no, I don't expect to change. And I think they will probably see this game as a real opportunity. Obviously, the flip side of that is if you don't then go and win it, then a lot of fans are going to be looking at this period and going, well, why the hell did you not make a change? So it's a dangerous one that they're walking, but
you've got to win that game.
Like you've got to win it.
And I don't care if it's Wagner or blooming the digital phone or bring back Splat the cat from the dead. We've got to beat QPR. They're a shit. They're shit. I'm not buying this. Oh, QPR nearly thought they're better. Blah, blah, blah. Come on, QPR.
2 draws in a row.
Yeah, exactly. Fucking win that game. Win that game. And Connor's right. The pressure's on. Keep David, and you don't win that game. Blooming heck, you've just wasted an international break.
Well, you do have a favourable run of fixtures. You've got QPR at home. It's then Watford away, who've got their own struggles. Bristol City away, again, have got their own struggles. Preston, and then Sheffield Wednesday before the East Anglian derby. So you've got a run of 5 games there where really you should be expecting something from each. So do you stick with David and go, this is a great opportunity to really dig in and run here, or do you bring in someone new and go, here you go, nice start for you?
I don't look at the what was that run again? Right, so Watford away. You've been to Watford away with me. Watford away, that ain't an easy game. I'm not having that. We should get.
I think they're probably playing slightly better than their league table.
Absolutely, you can't expect to get something out of that. I do think we should
be positive.
No, all right, and I'm challenging you because I like to. Bristol have just got a new gaffer at home, so
Norwich
that's a tough game.
Liam Manning.
Yes, yeah.
Lots of people wanted him. PNE were absolutely smashing it earlier on in the season, so that's a tough game.
Sheffield Wednesday.
You've got a banana skin in Sheffield Wednesday. Oh no! I agree we should be beating them, but just like QPR, it's a banana skin. So don't be like, it's a great one for David Wagner. There's some tough games in there, mate. I don't look at the stats, look at the data. This ain't gonna get better. It's not. Sorry.
Okay, there we go.
It's just not. Disagree with me, Connor. Do you honestly look at those games and go, Dave Wagner's going to get something out of each of those games?
Well, yeah, he might, but my issue is more what happens when you play the teams that you want to be challenging against in the table. If you're going to keep losing those games, then you finish mid-table.
And look what's coming up. You've got the East Anglian derby away from home, and you've got a run of games now for a new person at the helm to try to get their way of playing, cemented and solidified to get those players used to playing potentially a new style of football altogether, right? And so if you leave it too late for the derby, and I think we'll lose the derby match anyway, to be honest with you, but if you keep David Wagner at the wheel for the East Anglian derby, it's going to be an absolute horror show.
I think my concern, Connor, I look at even the last sacking of Dean Smith. Had a great opportunity going into the World Cup break. I think we just lost to Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
You go, perfect timing. And it feels like now's that opportunity. And also from a narrative around Wagner, goes out on a relative high in terms of a win against Cardiff. Look, you're probably right. He probably will still be here. But I'm just looking at this and going, for Knapper to make an instant impression and stamp some authority and provide his own DNA and tell us fans, like you were talking about kind of optics on the last podcast quite a lot. Great look. Knapper comes in, gets his own man, stamps authority, good run of fixtures. I'm just looking at this going, get it done. Get Wagner out. No, goes with my blessing and that, as you say, clearly a very nice bloke. I don't see it changing under Wagner.
But you guys watching and listening, let us know at TalkNorwichCity. Let us know your thoughts and feelings on the situation. Would you make the change now? Would you delay it any further? It's as Connor said, there is some grey space in this black and white world that we live in.
Connor, thanks so much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure watching your reporting and listening and reading all of the
Thank you very
all
much.
of the multimedia approach that you go for nowadays.
And thanks for knocking some sense into Jack on this podcast.
Chris, good to see you. I can't wait to see what the Norwich landscape looks like when we jump on this podcast next. I think there might be some change, or maybe not.
For all we know, when this podcast goes out, David's gone. I don't know. Who knows?
Thanks so much for watching. Head over to the Pink 'Un for brilliant Norwich City coverage, and we'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye.